Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Shri Ravi Shankar and his team for inviting me to come here and speak to you today. I have to say it's very exciting being in India. It's my first time, and that is definitely a way of connecting to a place totally unknown to me. So thank you very much for letting me come here and speak to you. And I don't really know what happened in the introduction. They made it sound as if I've done more in my life than I actually have done. And I think it's more or less a mistake that I'm invited to speak among these very distinguished persons. But I also have to admit I've done nothing to clear up the misunderstanding, because I very much wanted to come here. Now, my theme, making a global connection. That is definitely an enormous challenge, because inherently we as human beings, our practice is not to connect globally. We connect in the fundamental structure of families. Then we connect in relationships. We connect in communities, and even more, we connect by forming nations. And as you all know, where there are nations, there's also conflict, competition, and at times also armed conflict. And I think making a global connection is a rather new concept, if apart from sort of the spiritual concept of all humans being equal. But in the modern world, where we have a global economy, we have global migration, we have global communication through internet and other medias, and any conflict in the world today may have an effect globally on the rest of the region or even the rest of the world. So I think, for one, we are forced to connect globally because we are inhabitants in a global community. Now, but this connection, I realize, it has a spiritual side that has been addressed many times this morning. I will take a totally different angle. And before I take that angle, I will tell you a little bit about myself and what is my approach. My approach is the way of the lawyer. I am first and foremost, she made it sound as if I walk around and advise people on all kinds of issues, but I'm a trial lawyer. I assist people and I represent people, vulnerable people, on human rights issues. But also I represent very powerful people at times. And it gives me a unique opportunity, first of all, to see that any issue has minimum of 2 angles, if not 5, 6, or 7. And also it gives a unique insight into society of how different people live, how the corporate world exists. And I have to bring in mind that your great leader, Mahatma Gandhi, was also a lawyer and started his engagement in society exactly through his law practice. So that is my platform. And from that platform, I take a different approach to global connections, because I see that we have an instrument that forces us to connect, and that are the universal principles of human rights. It's a structure that perhaps is not so clear to many of you, and it is not in itself so clear. But if we take something very specific and very basic that all peoples are bound by, it is the universal principles of human rights and the Universal Declaration. And this convention was first drafted in 1948 by many different peoples, many different legal traditions. Today it has become common law, which means that it is binding for all nations to ensure that all countries grant their citizens these basic rights that follows from the Declaration. And it is one important universal principle, that it is non-discriminate, and it describes the rights that human beings have inherently, exactly because they are human beings. And I quote you Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. This is a very interesting concept because I told you it's the responsibility of states to ensure the rights. But here it also addresses the individual human being and challenges the reason, our thinking, and our conscience, and our obligation to connect in brotherhood. And of course it secures the rights of freedom, freedom of speech, basic rights of access to justice, the right to life, the right to security, etc. But I will dwell a little bit with Article 4 that says, no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. And we thought slavery was more or less abolished. And I think it is an enormous challenge to us that when we are talking about global connection, we have to think about, now who do we connect to? We who are gathered in this room, we have a lot in common. We are women, we are engaged in issues, we are educated, we have a global connection. But all the vulnerable people in the world, the people that are not visible to us because we relatively live in a very privileged position. How do we see them and who are they? I would say that in the world today, there is, in the Western world and in the higher middle class in the rest of the world, we have a lifestyle where we actually are dependent on slaves. There are mining, for instance, in Sierra Leone, where people work for no pay, child laborers that are engaged in the garment industry, in the carpet industry, in processing industry, that literally only works for shelter and food. We have a global problem of trafficking humans into domestic services, into prostitution. And how does this happen? Yes, somebody is taken away from their community, from their group of protection. are moved from one country to another country, migrant workers, trafficking. And you lose the protection you have of the social structure that you understand. What's commonly seen in these cases is that these people, mostly women, often children, sometimes men, passports are taken away, so you cannot move. You do not have the freedom of movement. You do not have the liberty of choosing where to go. And you are caught up in an everlasting debt to pay for your travel, for your shelter, whatever. Do we see these people when we talk about connecting? And this is not only a problem of countries in the world facing poverty, it's also a problem in my area of the world. And do I really see the victims of trafficking? They do walk on the streets of Oslo. There are Romani beggars on the streets of Oslo because their country of origin will not give them protection. And these are the people we absolutely overlook. So what I would like to say to you today at this conference is that when we are talking about global connection, we also have to talk about social and political issues, because they are a fundamental part of actually connecting. So our challenge is really to connect with the disconnected. The people who are disconnected from society, from protection, these are the people we need really to connect to. And then my last reflection, since this is a women's conference: are women better than the other half of the world in facing these issues? I have to disappoint you and answer no. Women are first and foremost human beings, and with all the inherent rights and duties and talents that other human beings have. It's just taken such an awful long time and is still not achieved globally that this is actually the position of women, that we have the same abilities, we can solve problems as good or as bad as anybody else. But coming together here, I encourage you that we do try to connect with the disconnected, and that we as women also see this as our duty and as our challenge. Thank you very much.